You are listening to Thrival Nutrition Podcast, episode 78. Welcome to the Thrival Nutrition Podcast with me as your host, Lahana Vigliano. We talk all things holistic living, real food nutrition, fitness, herbs, essential oils, and so much more. I'm here to make your holistic lifestyle simple, easy, and fun for you and your family. I am beyond thrilled that you are here. So let's go over and hop over to today's episode. Hi guys, I cannot believe it. It's almost the end of August and it's almost the end of 2017. I know this is just crazy. I look back and I'm like, where has the year gone? My guy is finally just starting school. I know a lot of our friends in other states and locations have already started school and they've been in it for a couple weeks, but my guy is just starting. But it's so surreal. I just actually saw what is this? A meme or a meme? I never know how to say that word. Anyways, I saw like a countdown of like a certain amount of weeks or days until Christmas, and it wasn't that far away. The holidays are my favorite times, and we're actually getting into my favorite time of the year just in general. I love fall. I love the holidays, and I love it on a business standpoint too. I love creating holiday yummy stuff for the blog and for you and podcast episodes. Because taking care of our health is 365 days a year. So no matter what, but it's my favorite time. So I can't wait for it to start, and I can't wait for it to start cooling down. I've heard from locals that it does cool down a little bit in Austin, thankfully. Coming from Florida, you might get maybe a week that's cold. So here I'm hoping at least a little bit of consistency, at least in the 60s, would be good. To me, that's cold. I'm a Floridian, so that's cold to me. I'm in boots and jeans, and I know some people, I have friends like in Alaska, and they're from Alaska, so they're like, that's summer to them. I'm like, I would be bundled up. But as we end August, so does our promotion for the $45 60-minute consult. Okay, it's usually $125. So if you use the promo code DIGEST, DIGEST, you can get that $45 pricing, which is really awesome. So we've been really zooming in and focusing in on digestive health. So maybe you're suffering from gas, you're bloated, cramps, even digestive problems that you have been diagnosed with of Crohn's or IBS. We're really helping those clients, and we've gotten such good feedback from this promotion. People realizing that, like, oh my gosh, like I don't know, they've lived with gas and they live with bloating for the longest time. That's become normal. And so when they were listening to the podcast and they told me, like, I don't know, when you kind of mentioned it, I was like, yeah, I guess I do have that. And they decided to use the promo code and check me out. It has made a difference, a world of difference in their life. And thinking that they could actually be feeling better than what they usually are used to got them super excited. So again, we are helping out and with people with digestive problems, but obviously you can use that promo code if you don't have a digestive problem. Maybe you just want to eat healthier, you just want to feed your family healthier, you can still use that promo code. But I really just wanted to target in and bring awareness to that problem, because our digestive health is so important. And forever, as long as you follow me, you will always hear me say that. Your digestive system is one of the most important things that you need to be taking care of and putting effort into taking care of. And it's really easy in our society in this day and age to kind of overlook that stuff, but it's the little things that matter, right? So in this episode, I'm sitting down with Sara Dean from the Shameless Mom Academy, and she brings some power in this episode. So I hope you are ready. She really talks about motherhood, what her life was like beforehand, being really into fitness before motherhood, and then kind of seeing how things changed when motherhood happened, and in a good way, in a really good way. And she talks to us about growing in every way possible. And this could relate to women and men and different ways, but she specifically likes, like me, to help women and really focus in on having someone grow, and not just getting a flatter stomach or losing weight, but something so much more and deeper than that. And her passion, you can tell it's in her just by the way she explains and talks about things. So it is my pleasure to have her on the podcast this week. I think that this message needs to get out there. And I know we talk a little bit about food freedom too, which is, not having that punishment for food and those quote unquote cheat meals and things like that. I think this is an episode that for sure just listen to all the way. She actually mentioned, it's so funny that she talks fast, and I think I do too, but I think I've actually slowed down over the years, or maybe it just depends on the day. But she talks fast, but you can understand her completely. She's so cute. But anyway, she said if you listen on like iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play, I know some of you are listening on my website. I don't think that's possible to do this. But if you're on one of those apps, you can actually slow down the podcast, which I knew, but I didn't really utilize that and even think to recommend that. But if needed, there's a lot of good information that you don't want to miss. So you can always slow down the podcast a bit if needed. But you will love it. So enjoy this episode. I will be sure to see you next week, or first week of September, a new month. I'm pretty sure I'll have some awesome stuff for you then too. All right, enjoy the episode. Hi, Sara. Thank you so much for coming on the Thrive Nutrition Podcast. How are you doing?
Hi, good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. This is going to be fun.
Yes, I know you have a busy day today.
Yeah, it's a back-to-back like interview kind of a day, which is fun. I mean, there's few things I do better than talking. So.
Sometimes I prefer it that way though, because sometimes you just get it all done in one day instead of doing one or two here and there. So I understand.
True. And I used to do a lot of blogging, and I would spend so much time like, oh, I'm going to do a little bit of writing now, and then I'll go back and edit it. Like with talking and recording, you're like, it's just done. So I love it.
Definitely. So let our listeners know who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I am Sara Dean, and I have a podcast called the Shameless Mom Academy. I'm also a gym owner, so I own a gym here in Seattle. And I am spending more and more time working with women through speaking engagements, through my podcast, and through different communities, working with women and with moms. Just talking about how to build your power and own your power and take up space and do things that you love just for you and not for other people, and all sorts of things like that, which has been really, really cool. It's definitely been a little bit of a shift since I spent 14 years prior to all this in the fitness industry working with women. And that was a really different place for me to support women. And a lot of that was more about like, how can I help you shrink and like kind of be nitpicky about your body and better abs and like things like that. And the conversations I'm having now just feel really different. And I'm really, really loving helping women be more powerful.
I love that. Especially I think when you start having kids yourself, it kind of like changes how you think. So I definitely understand that. I didn't even realize you were a gym owner. I knew you were really big into fitness, but I didn't realize you actually owned a gym.
I do. Yeah. Yeah. So I got my personal training certification in 2003. I did one-on-one training until my son was born 5 years ago. I also have done group training and had a boot camp since 2009. So, in 2012, I kind of merged my boot camp and my personal training, everything into one place, and got my own space where I could run my business. I had been renting space from other people before that. And so I got my own space and have been doing that. Now I run the gym from home. So a lot of people who know me through the Shameless Mom Academy, and through my online work often don't know that I own a gym, because I'm never at my gym because I'm at home running the gym, and I have 5 trainers who run everything for me at the gym. And I'm more behind the scenes, anymore with the gym piece. But yeah, I do own a gym, and it's great. I mean, I will say it's been a really, really powerful experience to work with women in a pretty intimate setting for the last 14 years. So that's definitely fueled the work that I do now in the online space and in the Shameless Mom Academy.
That's awesome. That's kind of my future plans for Thrival too. Like just really sticking with behind the scenes stuff, and obviously, online things, but eventually just having, a whole bunch of nutritionists under me doing a lot of the face-to-face stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it really is a good way to, when I started out, I loved doing one-on-one personal training. And when I was first doing classes, I loved teaching like all of my classes every week, and, getting up at 6 a.m. and showing up before everyone in the morning and like getting everyone fired up for the day. Like that was really fun and exciting. And I think that was like necessary groundwork for sure.
Yes.
But now I can see, and I think for a lot of people in the fitness industry, this becomes true, or in the health industry, this becomes true, that your reach can only go so far when you are seeing people in a one-on-one situation. And so if you can find a way to build a business on a grander scale and reach more people, that just, it feels like such a better use for your time and a much more powerful place to be able to serve people from.
For sure. I agree. So tell us a little bit about your background. What inspired you to start Shameless Mom?
Sure. So I was really inspired by my own experiences in motherhood. So I thought that it took us a long time to get pregnant. It took us 2 years to get pregnant with my son, a lot of infertility stuff. And so by the time he was born, I had built my gym business so that I didn't need to be there every day. And that was my goal. Like, I'm going to have a baby and I want to stay at home and I want to have these other trainers who are awesome and really well qualified. I want them to take care of my people so that I can be home taking care of my baby.
Right.
And when I got to that moment, being home taking care of my baby was way harder than being at the gym taking care of my people. And so that really rocked my world because I had really been planning on like, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom and like, I'll just, when the baby naps, I'll like work a few hours and run things for the gym. And like, it's just going to be this perfect little plan. And it wasn't that at all. It was hard and painful and frustrating, and nursing was an awful experience for me. And so being home with him just was not anything I expected it to be. And that was my entrance into motherhood was fairly traumatic because of that. And for kind of a variety of reasons, and mostly related to nursing because that was very traumatic for me. But it was not what I expected. And I had really idealized what this plan was going to look like and how it was going to feel. And it didn't pan out at all the way I thought it was going to. And so it took me about 3 years. And I've talked about this in other interviews where that whole first year, I just kept waiting for everything to go back to normal. I was like, when are we just going to go back to normal? Like, I just want to go back to normal. And it took that whole first year for me to grieve my old life and be like, this is it. You don't get to go back. And finally, after that first year, I was like, okay, like now I get it. We're not going back, but holy cow, where do I go from here? And it really took me another 2 years until my son was about 3 to be like, okay, like I'm in this now and this is good. And like, I think I'm going to survive. And so that really was a lot of what inspired me to start the podcast, is that I wanted to talk to other moms about my experiences in motherhood, how it was nothing like I expected. And I also knew that I wanted to be talking with women on a different level than I do in my fitness business. And I didn't want to just be talking about weight loss, as such an exclusive conversation anymore. I wanted to be talking about, and I talk a ton about transformation at my gym and the mental and physical aspects of transformation, but I wanted to be talking about transformation on a much broader scale, not just as it pertains to weight loss, because I'd been having that conversation for so long. And especially after having my son, I was like, the weight loss conversation, it kind of was old to me. Like once you have a kid, I'm like, I can't be super invested in like 6-pack abs because there's just so many more important things in this world. And so like, there's nothing wrong if you want to have a 6-pack. There's nothing wrong if you have fitness goals. And if you have, extremely vanity related fitness goals, or if you want to lose weight, like that's all great. But I had just reached a point in my life where I wanted to be having conversations about helping women grow and take up space and own their space, rather than having conversations about, how can I lose 7 pounds? How can I lose 10 pounds in 10 days before vacation? How can I lose my belly fat? How can I like tone my butt? Like those kinds of things, that wasn't my passion anymore. So that was really where when my son was about 3.5, I started the podcast from those perspectives.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like kids just do that in general, of teaching us more that there's more to life than just getting those abs and getting that butt and getting those legs. So I definitely have been in your shoes. And I think that as we grow, our family, and just as we age, even like we just go through different seasons of things that we want to, do and aspire to be. So like right now I help moms, especially with kids and school age kids. But I think when I get older, I might switch it up. I'm not going to be in that season of life anymore. So
totally.
I think that's just normal. So
it is. Oh, I noticed when I was first personal training, when I first got into the industry, I was a triathlete, and that's what I was super passionate about. And I was like, that's what I want to train. I want to train and I wanted to train not elite triathletes. I wanted to train people like me who had not grown up athletic. I'd grown up overweight, not athletic at all. I hated PE class, never did any sports. And I was like, I want to train first time triathletes, people who are just realizing their strength and their athleticism in young adulthood. And so, because that's where I was at that time. And it's funny, like then when I got pregnant, I was like, I want to train moms and I want to train pregnant moms. And so it's funny how I totally agree that like, I think especially when you have your own business, as you evolve, your business evolves with you. And I think that that's like, you can't help that from happening. And that's definitely what I'm feeling like it has been happening for me in the last year and a half since starting the podcast. And that's really cool. That's like part of the coolest thing about being an entrepreneur is that you can make something evolve with you rather than being like stuck in an office situation where you feel limited in how you can grow. And there's certainly nothing wrong with being in that situation or being in an office job, but you have to find different ways to grow if you don't have power and control over that. And as an entrepreneur, you have a lot more say. So that I've really, really loved that.
Yes, that is a huge plus for being an entrepreneur, for sure, is just any idea or feeling that comes to me, I just go for it. Like, yeah, I'm going to take that route. Like, that sounds good. So I agree. I love it. I love the saying that you said, stop shrinking and start growing. Dive more into that.
Sure. I think that women are really, really taught to embrace smallness and embrace being little and being petite and being like demure and dainty and like all these things. And I know that for me, I've never been small and petite, but I always dreamed of that. Like I was always in the back row of the class picture because I was one of the tallest kids in my class out of the boys and the girls. I remember there's a picture of me when I was little. I was probably 10 on a vacation with another family. So it was my sister and I, and then another girl a year younger than me and a boy my sister's age. So they were about 3 years young. My sister and this little boy were 3 years younger than me. And we spent the day at the beach. And when we got back from the beach, we're still in our bathing suits. And we all got in the bathtub together in our bathing suits. This sounds so weird, but we're in our bathing suits in the bathtub. We're like between like 7 and 10 years old. And we just lined up like sitting in the bathtub for this photo. And I don't know why we thought it was funny, whatever, but we have this picture. And I remember my mom, and back in the day of film, my mom getting the pictures back, and like we go and pick them up at the drugstore. And I'm looking through the pictures, and I remember looking at that picture and noticing that I took up so much more space in that bathtub than anyone else. And this is such a vivid memory for me. And I remember looking back at that picture over the years and just always thinking like, look how much space you take up in that bathtub compared to this other girl who was a year younger than you, or compared to your sister who was 7, who has just totally different body type than me. But that's the first time I noticed like you take up more space than other people. And that's when I first started really desiring, like, I want to be smaller. And I always, in pictures after that, I always noticed how much space I took up compared to other people in the pictures. And I think that women we really program ourselves that smaller is better, no matter at any cost. And I remember when I first became an athlete, I really wanted to do only cardio because I did not want to build any muscle because I was worried muscle would take up space. And I remember reading articles about like training for triathlons and how you could build muscle, which would make you stronger on the bike. But I was like, I don't want to build muscle if my legs are going to get bigger, because I would much rather have like lower performing skinny legs than larger legs that have quad muscles. And I was born with quads. Let me tell. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I love it. Yes. And like, even when my legs are out of shape, I still have quads. Like I still have lines in them. I have quads. Like there's no way around it. But I think that I was just always conscientious of wanting to be smaller, and that smaller would be better and is more well received. And that's when people come to me about weight loss, that's the same thing. Like they're just always wanting to get smaller. And I think that we show up in that way physically, but we also show up in that way in the way that we approach different situations. And so I was actually just talking with a company that I'm going to be speaking for in a few months, and they were talking about how they're encouraging leadership within their company. And they're like, when we have a company meeting, we want to see the women who enter the conference room come take a seat at the table rather than in the seats that are lining the perimeter of the room. But when we set these meetings, even if the women come in first and there's seats at the table, they generally sit along the wall and the men come and sit at the table. And as she was telling me this, and I've not worked in corporate America enough to have experienced this, but as she was telling me this, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And I could see myself totally doing that for the first like 37 years of my life. Like, I'm just going to come in here and like sit in the back corner, and I don't want to take up space and I don't want to make noise. And I did that in a lot of areas of my life. I mean, even like trying a new yoga class, like I'm just going to sit in the back and like be really quiet and hide. So that's where I just see women shrinking in so many ways, not speaking up with their voice, but also really trying to shrink physically and take up less space physically. So when I started the podcast, I wanted to really get away from this idea that we need to be always aiming to get smaller, because when we are constantly trying to get smaller physically, we are minimizing our power, we're minimizing our strength, we're minimizing how we show up in the world, and we're modeling that to our kids. We are modeling that, like, I need to take up as little space as possible, and I'm only worthy of this amount of space, and I am not worthy of a seat at the table. I'm not worthy of having a loud voice. I'm not worthy as being as powerful or as loud as my male counterparts or as other people around me. And so I think that's, I think it's so important for us as women, but I also think it's so important for modeling with our kids as well.
Yeah. Holy cow. You just blew my mind for the past 5 minutes. Oh my God.
And I'm a really too fast talker. I should have warned your listeners.
No, I'm a fast talker / listener. So it totally, it's my rhythm, but wow. I agree. And I even find myself, even not so much anymore, but sometimes even still, doing the same thing. Especially in a new place, I don't know anyone, or, I'm just I'm a little bit shyer, and a lot of people don't realize that, especially people that's been listening to me on the podcast for a long time. They're like, you're so good on video. And I'm like, I'm actually a little shy when I first meet you. I don't know. I don't know if that's because just personality wise but I hope to grow into that person that is just no fear, because I don't know, I feel like in the beginning stages of growing a little bit as my personality is who I am. So I'm hoping to get to that point of loud, proud, in the center.
And some of it, and I say this to people too, because sometimes when I say people need to take up space and use their voice and be louder and be bolder, if you're an introvert, that's okay. And if you're I understand that for me to get on a stage is so exciting and so exhilarating, but I understand that that's not for everyone. So I also don't think that everyone needs to be pushing themselves to be super loud and, putting themselves out there at the same level. I think that you can do this in different ways. I think that you can own your space, take up space, and be big and bold and loud and proud in all sorts of different ways. And so by no means do I think that everyone needs to be the most assertive person in the room or the loudest person in the room, if that's not your personality type. For me, it is. It's totally my personality type. And it's hard for me to sit in a conference and not try to take over the conversation sometimes.
Oh my gosh. See, when people ask me, they're like, are you an extrovert or introvert? I'm like, I'm both. It really depends. I can be both. I can be, when I don't want to be near anyone. And then there's times that I'm really outgoing, and especially if I have someone with me. So I think it depends. But what are some of your techniques, or even books or even podcasts besides yours, which I will definitely link up for people to listen to, but what I guess resources would you recommend for people to get out of that, to help them get out of that?
I am constantly reading. And so my current habit, and I've been doing this for probably 8 months or so, is in the morning I read about 10 minutes. So because again, I work with moms and I'm a mom. I don't expect people to sit down and read for an hour a day, but I do read in the morning. I'll read for 10 minutes, and that is some sort of personal development book. And I'll give you some examples in a minute. And then in the evening, before I go to bed, I'll read for about 10 minutes or till I can't keep my eyes open. And that is usually some sort of autobiography. And so what the combination of those two things is, in the morning, I'm reading something that's getting me really fired up and inspired about how to live better and be better and all sorts of things that just really inspire my mind to expand. And then in the evening, I'm reading people's stories. And when I read people's stories, that really, really inspires me to look at my life from a different perspective, or have a different, be more compassionate or empathetic toward other people, and just get a more global understanding of people and how they operate. And I am fascinated by people. I was a sociology major, and a psychology minor. So it's not homework for me to read about other people. I love it. I'm also super nosy. And so I love a glimpse into someone else's life story is amazing to me. So that's how I manage kind of consistently being inspired to grow and push myself. In terms of specific books, I'll give you some autobiographies first, because these are some of the first ones to come to mind. I just read Elizabeth Vargas, who is a news correspondent. I read her book called Between Breaths, which is about her experience with addiction and anxiety, which was fascinating. It was so, so good. And I'm someone who struggles with anxiety. So that it blew me away.
Me too.
Have you read the book?
No.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. And she talks about where her anxiety came from as a little girl and life experiences as a little girl. And that's what was so fascinating to me, because it made me really look back at things that I'd been really dismissive of from my childhood, where I was just been like, oh, whatever. Like, sure, my parents got divorced, but like, who, that does not make me special. And then I was like, oh my gosh, it totally makes me special. Like, not that I'm more special than anyone else, but that was a major life event that I've never really addressed, because I was like, I don't know, it was kind of simple. My parents didn't fight. It just kind of happened. And, reading her story really inspired me to go back and look at some things from my childhood and figure out like, how did some of those things contribute to my already kind of anxious personality type. Another fantastic book, Love Warrior by Glennon Doyle Melton. I'm obsessed with Glennon Doyle Melton. She's just amazing. So her most recent book is Love Warrior. She also wrote Carry On Warrior. Both are phenomenal. Love Warrior, I think, is just a great way. It's autobiographical, but she talks about relationships in a way that I just think is so relatable, in terms of her relationship with her husband. And there were so many things where I was like, yes, oh my gosh, I can so relate to this. So another one is Shonda Rhimes' Year of Yes. And that was like my favorite book of 2016. It was so good. And Shonda Rhimes, for those who don't know, is the writer and like creator of Grey's Anatomy.
I was wondering, I was like, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, Scandal, Private Practice. There's another one that I'm spacing out on. But anyways, so she's an amazing writer because she writes all these TV shows, but she's also hilarious. And so it's just an awesome book. It's like my top recommendation from 2016. I recommend it to everyone that year. In terms of personal development books, I love Danielle LaPorte's Desire Map is fantastic. Her most recent book, White Hot Truth, is also amazing. What else? I'm looking.
I was thinking, just with those like two things, like personal development and then even like autobiography, have you ever read like Tools of the Titans by Tim Ferriss?
I have it. You know what? I got it for Christmas and I haven't read it. And my goal when I got it, because it's like a Bible, it's so big. My goal was like, I'm going to read one chapter a day, and I haven't done it yet. It's sitting by my by my nightstand. So I have like 30 books by my nightstand because I order books faster than I can read them. So it's there. Have you read it?
No, we haven't. I dipped into it a little bit. I like skipped around because it's not really a book that you read every single like page. It's kind of like what you want to take from it, which is awesome. So I've kind of dipped my toe into it, but I feel like it's kind of the combination a little bit of like interviewing, asking questions, a glimpse into an entrepreneur's life or a business owner's life or whatever, and just not even an autobiography, but just their glimpse into their life and then advice to like help you grow. So it's like kind of both of it.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. Right now I'm reading a book that actually I have a early release copy of it. So I think it's coming out in October, but it's called Finish by John Acuff. And it's amazing. And it's all about like the cycles that we get in of starting things and not finishing them. And he's kind of like rewriting the psychology around finishing stuff. And it's so good. And he's also like super funny, which helps a lot when you're talking about things like finishing tasks and reaching goals. He like makes it not dry and boring. So I'm actually like telling everyone about it right now, even though it's not out yet, but I've loved it. I'm about like, I don't know, I'm a third of the way through or whatever, but like I'm finding myself wanting to make extra time for reading because it's so good. So I'd highly recommend that to anyone who has ever like set a goal and not met it, which is basically everyone. Go read Finish.
All right, definitely gonna read that one. So what are some of the best intentional practices that you do to fuel your body and soul and that you recommend to others?
So I am a big fan of a morning routine. And I should have mentioned Miracle Morning. Have you read Hal Elrod's Miracle Morning?
Oh, my husband hasn't. So I feel like I've read it because he's told me so much about it.
Oh, so good. It is so good. And it's actually a really good combination of like autobiographical and personal development. So I read it a year and a half ago. And I love his formula for a morning routine. I also think that it's fairly rigid. He gives you ways of kind of cutting corners if you want to, but like the way he does this protocol for a Miracle Morning is like an hour long. And I totally get that like not everyone has an extra hour in the morning, especially if you're a mom. Like you're not going to get up. The whole thing is like get up before your family and do this for an hour. Well, if your kids get up at 5:30, you're not going to get up at 4:30. But there's what I found the value in. So I did for a while do like the entire Miracle Morning protocol. I did it for about 6 or 8 months. And then I started kind of like tweaking it a little bit. So I've always been someone who gets up and exercises first thing in the morning. And that's been a part of my life for years and years and years. But what I've done is added other things to it. And so I've added pieces like reading and journaling. And so I know like when I get up in the morning, I am starting my day from a place of power, from a place of feeling really capable, from a place of being inspired. So that is super non-negotiable for me. So even at the very least, I get up and work out for like 15 minutes. Most days I also do some reading. Some days I also do some journaling. So those are things that like, those things have to happen. And I've actually in the last year had 2 situations where like I couldn't work out for a couple weeks at a time related to 2 different surgeries. And I was like, I don't even know what to do with myself. Like, what do you do when you get up? And our whole family is like, our whole family structure is built around that we all get up in the morning and have our own quiet time. And my son is almost 5. So but we've actually been doing this since he was probably 3. So we moved him out of a crib when he was 3 and he's been having quiet. And he was never one to crawl out of his crib. So he was in his crib till he was 3. He would wake up at like 6 and hang out in his crib talking to himself for like an hour. So I would work out during that time. Then when he was in his bed, once he turned 3, he would wake up whenever he woke up, but he had to stay in his room until his light, we have a little light. He had to stay in his room until his light turned green. And he would stay in there and play. And I understand we like hit the jackpot with a quiet morning kid. So I know this isn't reasonable for everyone, but now he's almost 5. And now when he wakes up, he knows like, I'm going to be doing my workout. I'm going to be doing my reading until about 7:30ish. And so he will get up and he's allowed to play anywhere in the house. It used to be he had to stay in his room, but now we're like, you can be wherever you want to be, but you need to be having your own quiet time. So he usually often sits at the dining room table. Our dining room table is now a Lego metropolis. And so he sits at the dining room table usually and plays Legos while I'm in the other room either reading or doing my workout. That's awesome. And then my husband gets up and he runs 3 days a week. So we kind of each are doing our own quiet time thing, which has been really great because it allows me to do my fuel my body. But it also sets this tone that like when you get up in the morning, you get to get up and take care of yourself and do something that's just for you and like have some time alone. And I think that that's really important that he sees us doing that, but he's also doing it himself. My son is also doing that himself. And I think that it's a great way for us to start off our day as a family. So that's my biggest thing is my morning routine. I would say other things that I do are like, I do a lot of self-care stuff without feeling guilty all the time. So whether it's like a manicure, pedicure, going out to dinner with a girlfriend, like I'm just really conscientious of putting those things in as often as I can. And my husband's really supportive of that. And he does the things that he wants to do. So like a lot of times, like tonight I'm meeting one of my girlfriends for dinner, which I often will do on a weeknight. Like one night a week, I'll often have some sort of either a work kind of event or a social kind of event. So he's used to like one night a week, I'm doing something and he's responsible for dinner and bedtime and he's fine with that. And then he's more of a weekend kind of a person where he'll like meet up with friends on a Saturday night and go out and do something and have like a boys' night kind of a thing. And I love it when he does it because I'm like, cool, I can sit at home and catch up on my reality TV.
Yeah.
So we both make time for the things that we really want. And we're both really supportive of each other in that.
That's awesome. That's like perfect balance, to be honest.
Yeah, it is. I love it. Like I'm totally happy to not go out on the weekend and he's like dying to go out on the weekend. So I'm like, you go find some other people to go out on the weekend with and I'm going to lay here and watch TV.
I'm the same way. Like I'm such a weekday person. Maybe it's because it's quieter. It's not as busy. Everything on the weekends are just so crazy. So I'm kind of the same way too. How do you live in a place that is, I guess, of privilege instead of punishment? And I know this is a really, really big one for the foodie community because I hear a lot of negative talk if cheats and, how they eat, but tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I started talking about this years ago at the gym. I run transformation programs at my gym and I started talking about coming from a place of privilege rather than a place of punishment when it comes to food and exercise. And that came from me doing this and me seeing so many other women do this, where you use exercise as punishment and you use food as punishment over and over and over again. And so most women, when they think back about their relationship with food and exercise, it has been that like you use exercise to punish you for what you ate, and then you use healthy food to punish you for what you ate. And so regardless, like if you ate the pizza or the cupcakes or whatever, you're like, okay, like now I'm only going to eat salad and I'm going to like exercise like way longer than today than I normally do to punish myself for eating the quote unquote bad food yesterday. And most of us have had that relationship with food and exercise for years and years and years, where it has always been this like cycle, this punishment cycle of one where you're always punishing yourself for some behavior, rather than like, okay, I'm going to go work out today just because I want to feel good, or I'm going to eat this salad because it's going to make, or these vegetables or whatever, because they're going to fuel me for the day and make me keep my energy better regulated than if I eat the bagel or whatever. So I started talking about that along the lines of fitness and nutrition years ago, and it really helped me because I was very much someone who used food as punishment. And I also would reward myself with exercise. I would reward myself for exercise with food. And so when I was doing a lot of distance running, like if I did a half marathon, I'd be like, oh, like now I can go and get like the brownie sundae from Dairy Queen because I did a half marathon today. So it kind of worked both ways. Like I would reward myself with food and also punish myself with food. And if I wasn't training for a half marathon and like I ate the brownie sundae from Dairy Queen, I was like, oh, well now I have to like go work out for like 2 hours to burn it off. And rather than just like enjoying the brownie sundae, because every once in a while it's okay to have the darn brownie sundae.
Yeah.
So I had to really refocus that in my head. And after I had my son, I had a bunch of health issues that first year where my exercise was like super limited in terms of what I could do. And so I found myself a lot of days, like I'd only be able to do like 10 minutes of exercise. And often it wasn't like, I had a lot of infections from nursing. And so I often couldn't do any upper body exercise. My lower body exercise was limited because I also had bladder issues. So my exercise sucked that first year. And for the first time in my life, I had to exercise for my mental health rather than my physical health. And what I mean by that is that prior to that, I had always exercised like, I want to use these weights and like use heavier weights because I want to have more definition on my shoulders, or I want to like have a flatter belly, or like everything had been with a vanity goal in mind. Right. And once I had my son, because I had to keep my exercise pretty low intensity, I had to exercise for my mental health because I was so overwhelmed by that first year that I needed the days that I exercised. I had more patience. I had more joy. I was more like just more settled and grounded. So I had to do it to maintain that, or I was going to go off the deep end, but I couldn't do it at a high enough level to actually get really any body results. And I actually gained a decent amount of weight in that first year after my son was born because of all these situations around nursing. And I was on a ton of supplements and on a very high calorie diet and all these things. So for the first time in my life, I was exercising not for vanity, just to like keep my brain in a safe place. And that was really, really different. And that's where I started realizing like, okay, I need to be grateful for like, I got to exercise for 10 minutes this morning while Vinny was eating breakfast. And literally I would like clip him in his little chair while he was eating breakfast or eating, blueberries or whatever, smashed up bananas on his tray. And I would do exercise in the middle of the kitchen floor right in front of him. And I was like, I have to look at this as like, I get to do this. This isn't me punishing myself for what I ate yesterday or what I'm going to eat later today. I'm doing this because I just deserve to take 10 minutes and do this. I'm doing this because I want to feel good today. I want to have more patience. I want to feel powerful. And that was really my kind of first experience, really starting to come from a place of privilege around that. And then I really started approaching coaching from that as well, that we need to be, looking at our opportunities as privileges rather than ways that we can beat ourselves up or punish ourselves. And even if you look at the way you talk to yourself about food, we often will say like, oh, I've been really good or I've been really bad. And I hear this all the time and it like makes my skin crawl. Or like if you go out to dinner with a friend and they're like, I'm going to be bad tonight and I'm going to get the pasta. Like food is so neutral. So you don't need to put everything in terms of good and bad, but that's what we do. And by the way, guys don't do that. Like guys aren't like, I'm going to be so bad and like eat the Oreos. They're just like, I'm going to eat the Oreos. So we really need to get past putting judgment on our food and also using exercise and food as punishment.
Yeah, I see it a lot. With same thing of like, I'm cheating, I'm doing all this stuff. And I always tell people like, as long as you're not, eating the majority of your diet. I'm a big fan of the 90-10 rule. I'm a big fan of like what we bring into the house is almost always good quality. And then when we go out to eat, it's just like, it's whatever. Like you can't control every single part of your life. And it just gives people so much anxiety over it. But it just makes that bad relationship with food. And then it just, I don't know. I'm not a fan of it. I see it all the time though. And I know it's really hard for people to kind of leave that mindset because since you see it a lot, I feel like it's become the normal. And that's like, I don't know, it's accepted, I guess. And so it's hard to get out of the mentality, but it's so awesome and it feels so good when you do get out of it.
Yeah, you really, if you start paying attention, you will start to see it everywhere. I catch myself doing it. I catch myself when I'm coaching people, and I'll use words like good and bad in relationship to food. And because it's what we do culturally, and it's what you've done your whole life. And especially if you've come from a dieting background, which like I did Weight Watchers for the first time when I was like in the 5th grade, I think. So if you've come from a dieting background, yeah. I went to Weight Watchers with my mom, and I was the only child there. And I went very willingly, but this isn't like me throwing my mom under the bus. I went very willingly. But when you start that young, identifying certain foods as good and bad, and identifying like cheats and that kind of stuff, and being like on program or off program, you get real messed up real fast. And I don't think that like my situation, that might've been young for me, but I'm not alone in being exposed to diet culture at a very young age. And so I think I think that you have to make such a conscientious effort to shift and really start listening to how you manage conversation around food and exercise in your own head. And then also what you're exposed to and what you see. And I follow very few fitness, I'm a gym owner, and you'd be surprised at how little fitness stuff I follow online and on social media, because most of it I think is done completely inappropriately. I actually had a colleague of mine, a male colleague, a few years ago, post this meme that was like, what was it about? It talked about muscles, and it was a woman with a 6-pack. Her head was cut off, of course. So it's this headless woman in the picture with her sports bra and 6-pack. And it said something like, women think that muscles will make you, or that weights will make you big, but in reality, cupcakes make you big. And I was like, oh my God, like, no, first of all, guys don't get to say those kinds of things. And second of all, cupcakes aren't evil. And if I want to have a freaking cupcake, I can have a cupcake. And third of all, like this woman with her head cut off in this picture, who is like just this invisible 6-pack woman that we're all supposed to be aspiring to be, like, it was just so inappropriate. So I'm really, really careful. I mean, that was like an immediately unfollow situation. And this is a person who I like actually really like on a level of friendship. And I appreciate that he's been really successful in business, but I will not be exposed to that. I will not. So now I'm so careful. Like the things that I see in my newsfeed related to food and exercise are women of all shapes and sizes. I follow a lot of body positivity sites. And so there's actually like women who are clinically obese, who are in their like sports bra and their spandex doing all sorts of different kind of exercise. Because to me, I want to see women being powerful. I want to see women being strong. I don't want to just see idealized body forms and body shapes. And so that's allowed me to really get out of that conversation and remove myself from participating in those conversations. I participate in those conversations at my gym because they need to happen at my gym so that more women can have this understanding, but I'm not involved in those worlds online because I don't want to participate in them. And I feel like I have my work cut out for me just being involved in my own community or communities and spreading the words that I'm spreading. So I just don't participate in that. And I don't expose myself to it. I don't read Self magazine. I don't read Shape magazine. I don't think any of those things are inspirational. I don't think that a person who wants to lose weight is actually inspired by someone who is already super fit and super lean. I think that actually most of the time that just makes us fall into the comparison trap and beat ourselves up.
Yep.
So yeah, that's kind of
definitely.
I'm really careful about that.
And I like it being a mom because my son sees me. He knows, he sees me cooking healthy foods. He sees us eating healthy foods the majority of the time and telling him to eat it. But then he also sees us when we go out and when there's a wedding and when there's a party and a birthday and all these different things. He sees us having and enjoying that, but not feeling bad about it. I mean, I guess having the repercussions, I get headaches after I have gluten, but seeing that and not making it such a big deal. Because I always get like replies and responds from people of like, oh my gosh, you eat that? I'm like, it's not the end of the world. I eat literally really good 90% of the time. Like, it's not a big deal. Not a big deal. So thank you for sharing that with us. Let our listeners know where we can find you.
Sure. So I'm over at shamelessmom.com, and there's my podcast is right there when you go to the homepage. And then there's a work with me link if you want to see other ways to connect with me there. And yeah, everything's all over there at shamelessmom.com.
Perfect. And then in our show notes as well. Thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
The contents of this podcast are for educational purposes only. This information is not intended to replace a one-on-one relationship with a qualified healthcare professional, and it is not intended for medical advice. This is the sharing of knowledge and information from education, research, and experience. I am not a registered dietitian or physician. I encourage you to make your own healthcare decisions based on your research and partnership with a healthcare professional. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week.